Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and go live. We're going to introduce you Omar Passons with Homeless Solutions. He's got a lot to say, so please listen in and tune in for questions, please. Here's Omar.
So we're in person. This is it's a different kind of deal. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm talking. Try to project through the mask. My name is Omar Passons. I'm with the County of San Diego's Office of Homeless Solutions, which is a new office inside of a department called the Department of Homeless Solutions and Equitable Communities. What we're going to do, so this is, we're going to go through a handful of slides that help explain like how we got here and the Board of Supervisors direction to our staff and our county staff in terms of what direction that it wants us to head, working with the community. Give a little bit of background, explain the sort of reasons. All of the materials that I will talk about are on our website. They're actually, I've seen them, I think even more of them on the Spring Valley Community Alliance website, or a broad set of information as well there that folks can plug into. I think one of the things to be mindful of, we as a team have been working with the Spring Valley Community Alliance and Spring Valley neighbors in different parts of the community for a few years now around issues related to homelessness, specifically in Spring Valley. I mean, as part of a larger effort, but specifically in Spring Valley. We were very involved. My team, I had staff that I had assigned to help work through the process of at Lamar Park in Spring Valley. Many who are listening may recall that it used to be a place where the sort of front entrance to the park had lots and lots of people and belongings and things for people who were experiencing homelessness. And so we made a point, myself included as the director of our office, to go out to the site, sit with people who were experiencing homelessness, find out what some of their needs and concerns and issues were. You know, the one of the things, and I'll get into this a little bit more as we get going, but one of the things that's different when you sort of just think about it conceptually, and then when you talk to people who are experiencing homelessness, which I know many in this room have done, and many watching have done, is that you realize that the things that sometimes people may take for granted are really important in planning. So one good example, right, is sometimes you'll hear people talk about, well, it needs to be walking distance from X, Y, or Z if you're going to do something. And the thing that really became clear to me in that moment, or as to Lamar Park, which we're happy we were able to offer everyone opportunities for housing, right? That's how they got out of the park and how it's now used, getting housing and supportive services. But one of the things that came out of that experience was a recognition that there are many people experiencing homelessness who have physical mobility challenges, right? So, you know, either using a walker or a wheelchair, or unfortunately, sometimes amputees that don't, the notion of something being walking distance is just, it's a different dynamic. It's one of the many things that we have to factor in. So I share that with you. That's how we started working with the Community Alliance. We've continued that. It's been a very good interactive process. Many neighbors from another part of the area close to Spring Valley Community Park around Orville Street have been very engaged for a few years, and in a back and forth way. I'm going to get to the slide deck, but I think it's very important because we actually have had 2 rounds of significant community engagement. The first, and then I'll swing into this. The first was actually this past summer. So the Board of Supervisors in April of this year said, hey, a different part of the county is working on a zoning ordinance amendment, and we're directing Health and Human Services staff, my office, to lead a community engagement process to help develop a framework for how to choose which locations to potentially work with. And so we had 10 community meetings at that time that were open to the public, and we engaged and we listened and developed a framework. Now that framework will be, it will be part of what goes back to the board, but we used it as a guide because we got so much good input from the community during that process. And then on October 19th, which I'll get into a little bit, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to go out. Supervisor Joel Anderson had a board action, said, we want compassionate emergency solutions and pathways to housing for people experiencing homelessness. And so this is not the first meeting. It's not even the fifth meeting. I think I'm probably on like 9 or 10 at this point, including, there's a bunch of formal meetings that were listed on the website, but we said true authentic engagement really involved listening to what community wanted to do in terms of understanding. And so community members said, let's get together at some of these sites and talk about them in person. And we did that. And let's get together again and stay engaged and talk about it. And we've done that. We really, really, really care about making sure that this is a mutual process for the community. So now I'm going to get started with the slide deck. Again, this is on the website. My name is Omar Passons. I'm with the County of San Diego's Office of Homeless Solutions. So can we swing to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the department that I mentioned is really the Board of Supervisors, which is our leadership body for the County of San Diego, called for the establishment of a Department of Homeless Solutions and Equitable Communities. That department has 3 offices: my office, the Office of Homeless Solutions, but then also the Office of Equitable Communities and Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. I won't focus as much on those other 2 offices, except to say that the Office of Equitable Communities, as it continues to move forward, will provide you an additional direct conduit into understanding what opportunities to collaborate with the county are, opportunities to drive like health and well-being in your community working with the county. So it'll be a really good connection point. The Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs comes from a directive from the board and will focus on the needs of immigrants and refugees in our community. The Office of Homeless Solutions is actually broken down into 2 sort of sides. And it's important to understand this because it can, sometimes we can lose sight. So on the one hand, there's been an expansion of direct services, right? So the number of people who are providing outreach, who are trained, who work for the county, who are out coordinating, collaborating, reaching people where they are on the street or in a ravine, unfortunately, or in a riverbed, has expanded. And that direct staff is really focused on providing that person-centered care and coordination and supporting people's transition, ideally to permanent housing, with support according to need. We also have a systems branch, which is important to understand that a lot of the issues that exist around homelessness, they're not just like one thing, right? You need sometimes behavioral health, so that's substance use and mental health issues, right? Sometimes. You need housing. You need environmental, parks and land use, or planning and development services. There's a law enforcement presence, and we're joined here today by the Sheriff's Department, Captain Brian Nevins. It is just the case that if somebody is committing a crime, whether they are housed or unhoused, there's a role for law enforcement. And so part of our job is to coordinate. And that system side really brings together all those different areas and works with the city of La Mesa, the city of Lemon Grove, the city of Santee, the city of El Cajon on these types of solutions. So that just gives you a lay of the land. Let's go to the next slide, please. I share this next framework for ending homelessness. And I will just say, for those that are watching, and we've had some of these conversations before, there are many communities across the country who have ended homelessness for their community for one or more subpopulations. And what that means is not that there's never anybody who experiences homelessness. What it actually means is that they have such a robust set of data and coordination and person-centered approaches that within 30 days of a person experiencing homelessness, they're able to get into a home with service and support, ultimately, either directly or ultimately into permanent housing. So that's our goal, is to make sure that people don't have to ever experience time on the street. And what I would say about this framework is you can see these key drivers, right? They run through all of the framework, person-centered. Really, like I mentioned before, going to the park and listening to what a person has to say. Our teams sit with people. I shadowed a few of our teams recently, and they will sit with people and just talk and try to understand and listen to their specific needs. And so that's what being person-centered is about. data-driven and collaboration. I mentioned that we're working with the cities in the region. I don't go more than a week without some communication with one of the adjacent cities. My staff is often engaged with the cities because we know that the boundaries, right, that show up on a map aren't relevant to like any everyday people, right? We have friends and family who live in our neighborhood, in another neighborhood, and the boundary line on the map matters less than, you know, what you feel in that sense connected to. So we really have to collaborate broadly. The sustainability, like how do you make sure when you do something that it has a long-term path to be well-funded and appropriately sustainable over time. And then that equity piece, because we know, right, especially as we're talking about the unincorporated communities don't have any emergency low barrier shelter, right? So that it just doesn't, to the extent that you're thinking about how equity works in this context, creating opportunities for people where they are, right, for communities where they are. This is about people who are experiencing homelessness and people who are in their homes, you know, wanting a community that sort of works well for everybody, and that's part of it. So I mentioned those key drivers, and then you can't see it that well on the screen, but again, it's on the website, so you can download and take a look. And most people are familiar. I usually go to the middle and say people know what services, treatment, and outreach is, right? That makes sense. The notion of catching somebody where they are and providing them the services that they need, outreaching to them. You know, emergency and interim housing, that sort of first piece of housing, or even a bridge to a longer term stay if there's not a permanent house available. And permanent housing, those things we sort of understand those. The first two I want to just mention though, the root cause and upstream prevention, right? That stuff that happens well before a crisis is there. The structural changes that we can make, that systems work that I talked about earlier, that's really important when you're talking about a full suite, a full framework, right? And then also the sort of diversion and mitigation. So sometimes, unfortunately, people actually do experience a crisis, right? And they are, for whatever reason, about to experience homelessness. Diversion and mitigation is about really stepping forward in that space and working in a thoughtful and collaborative way to try to prevent as many people as possible at that moment of crisis from experiencing homelessness. This was adopted by our Board of Supervisors on November 2nd, and it is part of the anchor for how we're thinking about this work. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so how do we get here? I mentioned on October 19th, the Board of Supervisors brought forward an action and said, we want compassionate emergency solutions and pathways to housing for people experiencing homelessness in East County. Now, the Board of Supervisors expanded that to the whole county. It was originally your supervisor brought it forward, Supervisor Anderson, and then it was expanded to all the county. But the board letter said we want to look in East County and preferably starting with the unincorporated communities. So that's why we're really making sure to give this attention. The first step, right? Is this need for community engagement and participation. Now, for the Spring Valley Community Alliance knows that we have made ourselves available at every turn, and we'll continue to do that. The East County Homeless Task Force, they have a representative in the room physically today, has been a leader for the whole subregion of East County, and we've been partnering with them as well and staying in touch with their leadership and activities. But the board was very clear. It said to do three things as to these comprehensive or compassionate emergency solutions. It said identify locations, come up with a funding plan, and come up with an implementation plan, and bring those back to the board. That takes you out of just a pronouncement and creates a very specific issue to act. And one of the things that is important for people to know is things like a funding and implementation plan. It's not merely finding the money for a tiny home or a shelter or emergency sleeping cabin or the services, right? It's what you're going to find, right, is there's all these processes related to architecture and design and utilities and all of these sort of site-related specifics. And then you also have all of this implementation and funding related to the actual thing. How do you design the right scope of work for the provider that will do it, that's responsible and responsive? How do you work with the community around contingency issues that might come up along the way, right? This is a complicated, long-term set of pieces that all have to be sort of thought about, planned out, adjusted for. And so part of my job as a director is to really get my staff to be focusing on all of those things, and then also work with our general services department to really, which is the real estate arm of the county, or that's part of their role, to really make sure that we're thinking about these things ahead of time. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what are we trying to do today? I'm going to speed this up a little bit so we can get to questions and answers, but there are two big objectives. One is just to inform members of the community, right? It's important that you understand, well, why is this happening? And is it just Spring Valley? The answer is no, it's not just Spring Valley. In fact, the sub-regional coordination is really important so that every community in the East County region understands, like, this is not, we're all doing this together. La Mesa is adding permanent homes for formerly homeless and homeless young people up to age 24, right? El Cajon just added, I can't even remember the number, but they just added a substantial amount of emergency housing supply with one of the providers in their community. You know, Santee and Lemon Grove have outreach related capacity where they're actually engaging directly. And we need all of that working together for this community. So so inform and then engage. Now, I mentioned that we've had several meetings that led up to this one. And so we've listened to what community has said, and you'll hear that when some of the questions and answers start. This is not a termination point. We do have to go back to the board. So we have to get like to a place and then start working on the response, all the internal bureaucratic stuff that I won't bore folks with. But so there will be a cutoff point for, we'll call it round one. But an ongoing discussion, because the need is great and we don't want to we want to continue to listen to the community, not just like a one-off kind of thing. Let's go to the next slide, please. So there are a range of options that we have been researching, vetting, talking to different communities in, not just in San Diego County, where there are a few that are in the process, but Riverside and San Jose and Santa Clara and Portland and Washington, the state of Washington. We really essentially said to staff, whether it's sleeping cabins, which are individualized units that have a door that can lock and AC and this kind of thing, or safe parking, and, you know, congregate shelter, which is sort of the thing most people think of, I think, in terms of a dormitory style shelter, which to be honest, we've heard from a fair amount of people with lived experience that they don't prefer that. And so we're trying to be mindful of that, because again, the goal is not just to act, it's to act in a way that actually leads to productive solutions. So we've got to be thoughtful. And then safe storage and services, again, if you have a home and you need to go to a doctor, you just leave your stuff in the closet or whatever. But if you need to do that and you're homeless, like, what do you do, right? Like, where do you store your belongings to go to court or the doctor, or, you know, go get a job, anything you might need to do, go to your job. Plenty of people, unfortunately, are experiencing homelessness with current jobs, and they need support. So these are the types of solutions that we've really been talking about. And I want to be very, very clear, all of them involved some layer of additional service component, right? It's not just, oh, here's a site, we're going to drop people off or open it up. There's a whole process. And I'll get more into that when we get into the Q&A. Let's go to the next slide. And so these next several slides are really just meant to show examples, to take us out of like maybe what our mind's eye sometimes pictures from TV or what we may have seen somewhere. And yeah, it's good to we can just sort of move through these first three that are there are all kind of emergency type, individualized sleeping cabins, tiny homes. Those are examples. There's another, and then we'll go to the next one. We'll hold on this safe parking slide, because part of what we're also trying to do is recognize, unfortunately, there are some people who spend time living in their cars, right, for a short period of time. And this is not a solution to homelessness. A permanent home with supportive services according to need is a solution to homelessness. But this is a solution to other problems: personal security, safety, right? The sort of comfort to just breathe for a moment and not have to worry about somebody banging on your car or anything of that sort. Hygiene, being able to have access to, a place to use the restroom, right? That's well kept. That is what, safe parking and these emergency solutions are about. Ultimately, all that we do also has to focus on what's the permanent housing option. What's the path to make sure a person has permanent housing with the support that they need? Let's go to the next slide. And then this is just, again, this is an example of some of the, a few examples of permanent types of housing that have been created in other communities. We'll go to the next slide. So I'm going to pause on this slide. I'm just taking a look here. This slide is some locations that are potential, and I want to underline that with a big marker, potential locations in the community of Spring Valley. One thing I'll note is that I said earlier that we really made a real commitment to listen to the community. And so this, unfortunately, one example of that is that there is an additional location at 8570 Hamishaw, which you can find on the community, on the Spring Valley Community Alliance on your website. I'm glad you showed it there, but it came up after we created and posted this set of slides. And so we didn't want to confuse people, but also we wanted to listen to the community. The community brought forward a site. And so we took that seriously because if you're going to engage, that's part of it. And we started vetting that site as well. And that's one of the sites that we'll talk about. And I'll be interested to get this community's feedback on. But so you'll see if you go to the website, there's a possible park and ride site on Avocado, which is unincorporated San Diego County. It's actually unincorporated La Mesa. And then there are a few sites. I'll say the Goodland Acres site is not one that we'll be going forward with. We just have heard like so many different types of communication from the park, the CSA 128, from members of the community, many in this room and in others, that there is not the opportunity as a first kind of location in that direction. So let's go. We can skip the next slide actually, because that's Lakeside. Now there's some questions here. Normally, I would never put this much text on a single slide in a presentation. Nobody's expected to be able to read it here. If you download online, you can take a look at those questions. You can answer them in the chat if you want. And I've got a team member who's paying attention, taking notes to what people ask and what those responses are. And so we'll make sure that we capture those. We are working on a frequently asked questions so that you'll be able to see all the different things that even your neighbors said over time, and what some of their thoughts were. The thing that I'll share with those watching online and the folks in the room is that the gist of these questions is essentially around that core point of trying to understand. We have heard from your community that you want 24/7 site security, right? That you want cleanliness built into the contracts and not just on site, but also at the peripheries, so that it's not creating potential issues around the site. That you want services that are there according to what people need, assessment services, behavioral health if they're warranted, if people need them, access to transportation and things of that sort, so that people can get to the doctor or court or jobs or the other things that people need. We've heard those. And we want to be open to others that you might have, other issues or things that you might think are important for a given site. One of the things I've heard from a few different people is that the design matters. And I want to be clear what I mean, because I've probed that one a little bit. It's not just is it how many units or whatever the solution is. It's also, we know that good design is important to us in our own communities, right? Like how things are laid out, how a park is laid out. Why should it be any different for people who are experiencing homelessness? And so we've had people say, like, you should really be thoughtful about the aesthetics of the place, about the aesthetics of the surrounding, and also what's actually there. A lot of people experiencing homelessness have pets, and so we've factored in pet care and dog runs and how do you design in a way that really is supportive of that? But so we want to know, aside from that, aside from 24-hour contact names and that kind of thing, what else may be important? And then, and I think this is really, as we've gone through this process, we've asked people, of the sites that you're seeing, which again are potential sites, are there ones that you tend to feel like, yeah, you know what, this is something that we could be comfortable with, and this is something we're willing to work with. We actually may even support. I think those things are really valuable for us to know, valuable for everybody involved to know. As I mentioned, occasionally the feedback we get is, hey, there's an almost unanimous sense that a given site is really not going to work. And the Goodland Acres is an example of one where we have it was on there and we heard what was happening. The reality, and this is where I'll pause and start taking questions. I don't know, Braulio or Chris, how you want to field those, but the reality is that the Board of Supervisors has said that it wants action on these compassionate emergency solutions and pathways to housing. And to do that, we need each other. We need the community to say, hey, we're open, we're willing. These sites, let's see if we can make this work. And we're gonna stay in there and hold you to the things that you're saying, county. And we as a county need to come with a little humility and make sure that we're working together. So with that, I'm gonna just pause and like I said, I can answer. I tend to tell everybody if I can answer a question with a direct answer, I'll do that. Sometimes things they're more nuanced. So my answers may be a little bit long, and I apologize in advance, but I want you to have the full depth. One of the things we often don't do is just like treat each other like adults, right? Like sometimes these things are complicated and it's okay to say that. And sometimes you may have frustrations or you may have questions and I shouldn't take that personally. And so I think we can just have a civil exchange and really try to build towards a solution. So I don't know.
That's great. I super appreciate your time today. I see there's a chat on the Zoom. Is there?
That was Michelle.
I'm
Okay.
just communicating.
So there are no questions so
Not yet.
far online? Okay. Is there anyone here currently that wants to ask a question?
Everybody.
We can start from that second one.
Yes,
We're probably this way.
Thank you, Julie. Bonnie, do you have a question?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm John Richardson with the Grossmont Mount Helix Improvement Association. And we represent nothing in the area other than Site A. And my questions are surrounding Site A. But more specifically, generally, there's these locations have been elsewhere in the county. Does anybody have any stats on the impact of crime, health issues, sanitation, and so forth on other sites that these tend to be sort of a attractive nuisance to the people who live in immediate areas or have business in immediate areas? These stats are before and after.
So I'm going to repeat this, Mr.
John.
John's from the Grossmont Mount Helix Improvement Association.
That's correct.
I'm going to repeat, paraphrase. Let me know if I get it. John's question is specific to the Site A, which is an avocado. It's the avocado. It's a parking space that might be considered for a park and ride. Again, a safe parking lot with associated services and support available. And John is asking, to the extent that these exist in other parts of San Diego County, do we have statistics on before and after with regard to crime or health in the area? And I think a concern that things like this might be what he described as an attractive nuisance or bringing issues of concern to the area. Did I capture that?
General, yeah, I'm just looking for, is there any research based on trying to put substance to people's fears that they are attractive nuisance? Is there any substance or stats showing that there really isn't, or is it just, we all hope that there's not?
Yeah, so it's not an either or, actually. So the last part was like, is there any substance demonstrating like that we know that crime does or doesn't go up or down, or are we just hoping that it won't be? I'm going to defer the first part of that question to my colleague, Captain Nevins, to find out if he's aware of any crime-related data. I will tell you that as to all of these, part of what we are building in is a before and during measure of these types of things so that the community can know proactively, like in a phased approach, like, well, what happened 6 months in? What happened 9 months in? That kind of thing to get at your question. But I don't know, Captain Evans.
So those statistics do exist, but only in as such that what we currently have, and we don't have anything. So I could establish a baseline now and then see what happens. I don't know of any other areas where these services exist, do they? And if they do, in the sheriff's jurisdiction, I can actually compile those stats as well.
Yeah, there's in San Diego, the city of San Diego,
City.
there's multiple.
Yeah, and I don't have access to the crime stats, but I do have people that I know there that I can certainly ask.
And so what I'd like to do, I'm going to do a little bit of I've got staff that's listening in, and I just want them to make a note for me to follow up tomorrow, both with Captain Evans and with our colleagues who operate the safe parking lots that are in the city of San Diego on the issues of, do we know about crime before and after? Is that data available? And we'll post that with the frequently asked questions.
So I can't speak to the park and ride, not park and ride, the safe vehicle night over up in Encinitas, and they've actually established that there is no additional crime that occurs in that, based on the people staying the night there and then having to leave throughout the day. And a lot of people did, a lot of residents were concerned about that as well, and they pulled the stats and it's really not.
And I would add, so while I can't speak, so the location that you're talking about, John, is a potential for parking. When we started this, I actually reached out to SDPD to ask about a former safe camping site in the city of San Diego to find out if there was any associated like impacts related to crime. And they actually said that they had not had any call outs to that location during the time at 20th and B that it was there. So that's maybe another nugget, John, for your knowledge.
I know Santa Barbara instituted safe parking lots way back in 2015 or 16, I think, and they have a lot of great data on that. They've got safe parking throughout their area. So I'm trying to get that.
And so for my staff, again, we're just gonna make sure to note for our design team to check the Santa Barbara available data. Thank you.
So in general, just for questions, if someone asks a question like John did, we'll do follow-up questions on that topic. That's okay. Okay. So if you have a question that's a different topic, we'll go to you next. So I do have a follow-up question in regards to what John is bringing up. I don't want to step on your guys' question because one of the things that I am curious and wondered about is the wanderers and the people who tend to stay at the facilities, but maybe not work. And so during the day, they leave the site. And so is there going to be any additional funding for the community to allow for more sheriff department patrol for the surrounding communities?
So Ralio's question is about funding or support related to people who may be parked at the site and wander around the given neighborhood. And I guess I would answer that in a couple of ways. Well, one is it's the question kind of assumes the point, right? It assumes that there will be people who just park their car there and then go, meander about. I just went to this site on Friday or Thursday of this past week, just to go where the Dixie line is at the bottom and I usually just go up and see it and look around and kind of get a sense of like what's here, what do we need to be thinking about. Now my staff had already been there, our general services has already been there, but I always like to have my own eyes on it just so I know. And I would say this, part of being mindful of tracking the data on the front end is so that we can tell whether the type of thing that you're talking about even happens, right? Or at least is indicia, right, that it might be happening. Because it'd be really hard to actually tell, like, did this person come from this thing? But if we saw elevations or concerns, I think that would be something we would want to make sure we had a place to follow up on. And this is the important part, is these types of services, they're not generally, at least so far, done by county employed staff, like the actual operation of a shelter, operation of a safe parking lot. And so what happens is there's a request for proposals that will go out in a public process. And that's just That's basically like this detailed document with a scope of work that says all the things that we want a provider to do. And it's written down for everybody to see. And there is an opportunity for any member of the public when there's what's called an industry day to actually like just get the information, grab the actual, you got to register on BINet, which is a county thing that we can provide the information for, but you actually get the information and then you can make sure, like to your point, Braulio, is there a line in this contract that actually does provide for, addressing what happens if there starts to see an uptick of issues in the surrounding area? Is there some requirement for the security to document and share data about what's happening? All those types of things that will allow us to know. I know that's a long-winded answer, but it's like I said, like that's the sort of the reality of it. So we can't. I would say I won't know until we're done with the scope of work all of the specific nuances, but these are the types of things that I think we can build in and provide people some reliance that we're paying attention and looking at solutions for.
Yeah, I get that. And so perhaps creating a sort of independent citizens board would make sense. So that we can sort of be a checks and balance for your department.
So I think that's an important point that I've had raised before, and I want to make sure our staff gets that down. The notion of a kind of good neighbor board sort of for any given site that maybe is built into the contract that the provider has to create, or maybe we'll have to talk about that internally, but I want to make sure we flag that because it could be the type of thing that facilitates the further partnership, right? Like it's not about like we are stewards of the public dollar and trying to preserve and improve the community, and having residents who are concerned and interested in what's going on, from a variety of ways, from a safety way, is the services that we're supposed to be offered, are they really here? Are people getting that compassionate support? I'm glad you raised that, and we're going to make a note to find out like how do we want to address it in this case? So thank you for raising that.
Yeah, thank you. And I mostly, want to make sure that there is that continuity between that sort of a board or that sort of a group that your homeless solutions will really act immediately when this sort of a board really has concerns.
Yeah.
So if there is some way that we can work together on that, that would be really, I think that would be a good benefit for Spring Valley and Lakeside and East County.
Well, and so we'll flag that and just say, like, as this process keeps going forward, just as we've been open for ongoing dialogue, let's just keep those things alive as we turn into returning to the board. The date to go back to the board is February 8th, just for everybody to have that insight. The way these things work is there's a bunch of pre-work that has to happen, which is why our team has really been pushing, last month and this month to have as many meetings as possible, because at some point we have to go from identifying and engaging to like creating. Right now, during this whole time, I've had staff working on all the background work, right? The research, the other communications, the meetings you've got to have with the behavioral health folks and the other, all of those things have already been happening, but we can't do anything until we have the sites. We can't do the next phase until we have this first set of sites. So anyway, well taken.
We'll definitely look forward to having more questions.
Another question here on that particular site. There is two things. That used to be a Caltrans park and ride, and it was leased. The county owns the property. It was leased to the Caltrans people. That lease has been, they had ongoing issues with crime and homelessness stuff going on in that location. So they chose not to release that property. They already have a park and ride in the Spring Valley area, which is right there. There's an existing one there. Okay, so could you move back to the other location? No, that's great. This is really nice. So you can actually see what we're talking about here is that now this is not in Spring Valley. This is actually outside the footprint of Spring Valley. So the question to the county is, what input have you had with the commercial people that run businesses immediately adjacent there, especially the child care and nursery school right there, and the homeowners that are all within the quarter-mile footprint where the neighbors that have been brought up or other things that go on. Have you had any input directly from them? I know you've talked to homeless people, got that, and we all want to support what's going on and find some solution to it. But more specifically, this particular site here, have you talked to the people who are going to be most impacted directly by having this done? Because they've already been impacted, and there was a sigh of relief in the community that, oh my God, that's great. They've closed it. That nuisance is now gone. Maybe, hopefully they're going to put something there that's going to be useful. The property is currently being marketed, and I think that there's a buyer and potential buyer. Is the potential buyer associated with this effort? I mean, is the potential buyer buying this to convert it to what's going on here? Do you know?
I don't know. So John asked several questions. One, he mentioned that it's his understanding of potential buyer for this avocado piece of property. I'm not familiar. I don't know. It's not
It's not associated with.
it has not, that has not come anywhere up in any of the dialogue thus far. I would say that the reference to, so in terms of communicating, the county has an existing sort of set of channels to get communications about these issues out to the public. And so the e-blast to the CPGs and CSPGs and those that network of communication has happened.
Which is outside. This site is not part of that, and so.
No. So
those
John,
negotiations aren't really involved with the Rancho San Diego /
Oh, no, I'm sorry, just to be clear, when I say out to the broad CPG and CSPG, I'm talking all of the CPGs and CSPGs, right? Like the fact that we're talking about sort of Spring Valley in air quotes, and I say in air quotes because there's another location that's also not in Spring Valley. The point is that there are potential sites, and we're trying to reach to everybody that we can. And there's just not enough time to go like door to door to every site. So we have to use some of these other channels. And so I haven't heard from the specific community members that you're referring to. If there is a group that we could have that conversation with, I would certainly love to do that. I think as to one of the things that's really, I think, useful to know about some of these sites and the difference between what you see on the map and what you see when you actually physically go out to a location is, John mentioned that there's a Dixie line down there, but there's also a child care center. And the thing to realize is, like, on the map, they look like they're right next to each other or they look pretty close to each other. Physically, when you're out there, you realize that we're talking about a hillside down a slope. Now, that's not to say that any of the issues that you or others in the community might have interest in or concern about are things that wouldn't also need to be factored in. But it's useful for people to know, like, if you actually go out there, what it physically looks like and what some of those separations are. So I think, as I said, John, it would be great. Frankly, I would happily give you my information. I would love to have more conversations with any of these sites. I think because it's a new thing for the unincorporated county, I think there's a degree to which I've heard from many in the community a desire for we'll say graduated approach, maybe is the way I would describe it. It's like it's not like if that site that we're talking about could hold 50 cars that if it came to pass that right away, that's what we'd be looking at. I think we've heard from folks that there might be a desire for some almost like proof of concept phasing for some of these things. So I just want to have shared that with everybody, and we're still in the process.
One other thing, from a note from our group that got together earlier to speak about, to find out more information about that. It would be good for you to post each of these locations, that's what's going to go on before you make the decisions being made. So the community that goes by, and this is really high traffic area, people going on or off of 94, big traffic concern here, post the property with the idea that this is a potential and just giving everybody notice, because otherwise we're gonna have a problem in the future when people realize what's happening here and they haven't been notified. It would be helpful because you have a huge amount of traffic going by there. And I think because there's an ongoing pattern of problems in that with that park and ride. It would be good, at least let the community know that that's what's going on, because again, this area is not associated with the Spring Valley groups. And so, and then there's really not, other than ourselves and the VDO, which is the Valley, Casa de Oro Planning Group, which is also, this is a little bit out of their footprint, but still within the county planning area. Those two entities have some input there, but like our group only has 850 people associated, and that's over a big geographic area, which does include this.
Yeah,
And so it needs to have more public exposure before a decision is made if this is a viable space.
well, I think two useful things for you to know is that we reached out to CDO groups that specifically, and just didn't get a reply back in terms of trying to come and engage. And I think that it's important for everybody watching to know, and everybody listening, engaging to know, that in some ways, the very issues that John is talking about are what these done well, what these types of solutions can help address, right? The existence of 24/7 security, which is not there now, the existence of supportive services and pathways, right? And as Captain Nevinson said, and frankly from my own communication, like we'll get additional data to the extent we have it, but it's just useful for folks to know that part of these opportunities is the potential for lessening these types of impacts on community as opposed to increasing. So just wanted folks to know that, and yeah, like I said, we'll definitely engage.
Please include the CHP, because they're the ones that took care of leasing that location prior to its closing. And also they do police that park and ride, even though it's their dirt that they take care of. It'd be good to have their input, not just because I think the sheriff does not police park and ride areas.
Right. So made that note. I want to make sure that the rest of your community has a.
Yeah, thank you. Is it okay to move on from that,
Sure, yes,
from that location?
sorry,
And then more parking right,
Didn't
will
mean
go
to
up, I'm sure.
but there's a lot of questions. There's uncertain about that location.
Absolutely, I agree with everything you're saying. Dale, you have a question?
Yes, really quick. Mr. Passons, you mentioned Hamashaw, but there are two Hamashaws. There's a boulevard and what is it, road? Yeah. So could you say that address again? And, okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. It was on the screen?
Now, it is.
Hamershaw Road.
Okay, and what is it, 80? It's a little bit off the screen.
8570.
8570. It's where the red thing is on the.
It's basically, and I don't know, I may be getting off the other screen, but there's, if anybody might be looking, there's a drainage channel, there's some Caltrans related drainage items on one portion. And then there's a sort of a large portion next to it that is essentially open land.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize where that is, and can anybody?
To help out, across the street is the
The big T.
Big T.
Big T.
Oh, okay, now I know.
It's on the west side of the 125.
And then you said that is a potential site for what, please?
like the same kind of like emergency sleeping cabin kind of layout. What it actually looks like would vary quite a bit, or would depend on design, etc.
But not a parking area.
No,
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
I have a few questions. So one is, does the redistricting affect your plans?
so
Because I know.
not yet. I
Okay.
mean, honestly, so this is what I would say. We have a direction from the board,
Mhm.
right? And it's all 5 supervisors. And so our job is to move forward on that. I don't really get involved, I guess you'd say, in the impact of redistricting, because as staff, we're just like, how do we meet the call?
Yeah, because what I'm worried about is I don't know where we are with the redistricting. I haven't been following it, but if it does happen where it's split and then the community all of a sudden, they were supportive at one point, but then it split and now they make you guys go back to the drawing board to pick locations because they changed their mind.
Yeah,
That's just one of my concerns. Also, just speaking for myself, not SBCA, I think the site C, the Caltrans on Sweetwater in Oroville is a good site. I think that would be a good place for the mini home. And then lastly, site C, the Sweetwater and Troy Street.
mhm.
Have you guys considered the halfway home in that area? Because I think right now, a lot of the wanderers are coming in precisely from there. There seems to be one or two halfway homes or some kind of place where they congregate there. I don't know what it is. So have you guys taken that into account in terms of collecting your stats, like,
Yeah, so it's Julia?
yes,
Julia's questions, first for my team was like a supportive note about the Orville location. But then a point for tiny home or emergency sleeping cabin type options. But the second one was a question about the extent to which we've considered at the other potential site that's at Troy Street, the other nearby use that it may be a halfway house or some sort of shorter term stay. And there's, I think, two things to say about that. One is, I can't stress this enough, that's a site that is in the like potential underlying category because it's in the city of Lemon Grove. And so like our steps on that one are really about making sure to engage Lemon Grove as a community. First, we included it because frankly, when you do a search for a bigger search for the whole area, you very quickly, our general services very quickly realize that like either there's a lot of sites where people, property owners just say, no dice, we won't do it, like private sites that they won't do it. Or things fall out for other reasons, environmental concerns, etc. Which is to say, it's there to get people's input from this community, understanding that nothing's really gonna happen there until and unless Lemon Grove is sort of interested in partnering. Caltrans is open as far as it goes to that location, which is why we included it. Because this is the problem, that particular site is like basically right on the border.
yeah.
And so you can imagine, it's actually not that unlike John's point earlier. Even though it's in Lemon Grove, and we're gonna go talk to them, can you imagine if we hadn't raised it and gone to just Lemon Grove, and then all of a sudden people who live on the other side who are in unincorporated area, they're like, well, wait, why didn't you tell anyone? So there's this weird chicken or the egg thing. But I think the answer to your question is ultimately, if that goes past, step A, the identification kind of, we would want to engage Lemon Grove and engage the surrounding area to have that deeper conversation. And I say it like that, I don't mean, I'm not trying to like drop like bureaucracies on you. When I say that deeper conversation, I just mean the reality is that everything that we try to do, every site, every location, every community, everywhere is going to be not perfect for like something or another, right? And so it's a challenging place to be, but our board is committed to trying to address. And so that's all I mean when I say like we have to have that deeper conversation. Is like, can these services potentially help? What can we do to make sure that like it doesn't increase the types of things that you're talking about? Those are all things that we have to like work out and then come back to the public.
I mean, I think it's a good site, and I think that if you did have something there with supportive services, maybe you can grab those wanderers, and help out. I think it would help that area if it was a site, because I mean, I think that's where most of our problems are coming from. So if you guys had something there, you probably reach out to them as well.
No, it's good, and I think it's useful, that's a good point, Julie, to raise, when the Supervisor Anderson brought this board action forward, it also included, we're talking a lot about the identification part, but it also included a call for expanding, coordinated, compassionate homeless outreach, right? Like, and so we've got, staff that are in the process for doing more of that direct outreach as opposed to just when somebody shows up somewhere, right? And so with that type of coordination, we want to also see some progress. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I think my question, Omar, thank you for being here, is more about the identification. What brought this about from the county in the sense of you felt that need to bring these cabins, these shelters to Spring Valley specifically? I know we can all say there's homelessness, but we can all appreciate and that there's a variety of reasons why people are homeless. And the ones we see on the street, the majority of those people are not trying to take your services. I know that personally. I know that there are mental issues and there are drugs. So from what I can see on the street, the people in the tents and that are posted up and living homeless, those are not the people I don't think that you're going after. I know you can encompass homeless, but I'm wondering, is there data that the county has that you have a list of these homeless people that have experienced these situations that have put them on harder times, so to speak, that has raised this desire now that you feel they need to bring them to Spring Valley to tent them or put them in homeless? Like, is there 100 people that you know of as the county that will use these resources? So I guess the focus, I know that was more of a comment. And so because I'm trying to understand this, and what I'm trying to put into reason for me is, are there people that you know right now that are in East, like a numerous amount of people in the East County that are looking for resources like a cabin, but you don't have that to provide to them for that shelter?
Yeah. So Judson's question is a good and kind of complicated one. Like, are there people that I know right now are experiencing homelessness and in the community of Spring Valley who would accept an emergency sleeping cabin if one were available in Spring Valley? And what's prompting this effort to try to identify locations in Spring Valley? The first answer is yes, and right. We did lived experience panels where we hired a contractor to work with, including people who are currently on the streets in East County. And I can't tell you, like, as I stand here right now, were the people on that lived experience, workshop, were they in Spring Valley or Lakeside or unincorporated Elkhorn? Like, I don't have that data that right in front of me, but that's one of the ways that we found out that these types of solutions were something that people who were currently on the street said that they would value if they were available and would like. So that's one answer to that question. I think the other, frankly, you and I had a conversation at Lamar Park once. After, maybe before one of your meetings, I can't remember, or maybe actually, frankly, it was before one of the cleanups, which is really a great thing that the Spring Valley Community Alliance does. I said, we had a conversation about like whether people do or don't want services and how many people will say they do or don't want services. And this is another one of those things where I apologize in advance. It's got a little bit of nuance to it. I meant myself going to Lamar Park and Spring Valley Community Park, and actually, frankly, several other locations around the unincorporated areas and chatting with people. And I know that there were people in that park who said directly, we don't want to, we're not interested. And they said that the first time, and they said that the third time, and we assigned our contractor and said, hey, can you just keep going out and keep going out? And our team, right, is filled with people who are trained to have that compassion and persistence. And ultimately, at least a couple different groups that are in my mind, they did get housed and they did take the services. And so I think the nuance is are there people who say at time 1 and time 5 and time 10 and time 15 that they're like, leave them alone? Sure, right? And sometimes that's for a variety of reasons. Trauma among them, right? Being burned among them, like all sorts of things, right? There's probably other rationales. I share all of those things, and it's a longer answer, and I'm doing it because there's also people online who we haven't had a chance to chat before and may not know. The why of this is that the Board of Supervisors said unanimously, we need low barrier shelter of some sort, compassionate emergency solutions in the unincorporated communities. And so our job as staff is to take that direction and try to do it in a responsible way. So the board has recognized the need and has called for that. So that's the answer to the, like, why Spring Valley? And again, it's not just Spring Valley, but it's, as an unincorporated part of San Diego County, like, there are people, and I've talked to them, who became homeless after graduating from high school in Spring Valley. I talked to former Mount Miguel students, whatever, like, and so the question is, and they're not gonna go because sometimes, like, grandma or auntie lives in the community too, and while they can't live there, they get some kind of help, right? This kind of thing. So this is sometimes the community is where people identify with, and if we can create a bridge, a real meaningful bridge, we can help, again, pathway to permanent housing. So that's a nuanced answer, but I hope it gets at what you're asking.
It does.
And we need better, I'm sorry, Julia. I want to be clear about one thing. I sometimes will speak with like a ton of conviction that sounds like some like super certainty. And I want to be clear that it's not like I know, my staff knows, and we know like infallibly 100%. That's not realistic. We're doing the research, we're talking to people, we're doing the work we can, and we do need better data, and we need that data on an ongoing basis, and we need to understand that these things may be more fluid. And so I don't want to come across like we're just saying, oh, it's this way and that's that. I just want to share the broader picture as well.
And I just want to open that dialogue so you can see it from the community, because that is definitely something we want to understand is there are people here in Spring Valley that will take these resources or oppose, or are we just bringing people here now?
Yeah.
And we're going to still have our homeless population that we see, and we fix nothing except now we have people coming from other locations to our location.
And Julia, before, that's actually a really good point that Judson just made about like, well, let's say we stand up one of these emergency sleeping villages, right, where people have a chance to get these services, et cetera. One of the questions is like, well, how does somebody get to be in there, right? Like, how do they get chosen? You just walk up, whatever. Part of what our staff is in the process of really working through is the referral pathway in tied to the outreach teams who are in Spring Valley, right? So that's part of the conversation, is like, as a sub-regional solution, right? Whether that's in Spring Valley or just next to Spring Valley, or right, like it's thinking about this in a way that is not just like, here's a ticket, walk up to X, but like, let's engage on the street, right? Let's talk to somebody, and we're seeing, I was just on a call on another committee that's working on the same issue. We're seeing that people are starting to say, people who are on the streets are starting to say, many of them, if I had this kind of solution, it's part of the reason we're talking. This is not, it's the image that I had, they've got on the screen that some of the emergency sleeping cabins, that sort of like road approach, all sandwiched next to each other. I want to make sure folks know that's just the picture that we found to show what they look like, or what an example of them looks like. That's not the good design I was talking about earlier, and not what we'd be talking to our architects about laying out. I just wanted to make that point. But anyway, bottom line is, I think we're trying to be mindful of how to create solutions at a sub-regional level, and the referral pathway is going to be part of that.
Thank you.
Mine is a little off topic, but kind of just for information. The population of Omar Park, I know they all went into housing. Like, we don't have housing in Spring Valley, so where did they go?
That's a complicated question. So part of the answer is that the county had established a regional, like, hotel assistance, homeless assistance program that was connected to hotels that happen to be in other parts of the region, right? So there were partnerships in El Cajon, there were partnerships in other communities. And so like that's where some folks went. There's a coordinated entry system. We haven't talked much about the homeless management information system, which is not run by the county. It's run by the continuum of care, which is, it's just a body that the federal government has called for establishing. And it is the lead entity, the group that staffs that is the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. And so they manage this homeless management information system and the coordinated entry system, which is a pathway for people, regardless of where you are in the county, to get to a permanent home. And so some people, like everybody gets entered into that HMIS and then referred over to the coordinated entry. And so they get placed through that. So it's, so I don't always have the all the way throughput on where they actually go.
Okay. That was just for information. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a, part of your presentation has some permanent solutions or permanent path? My concern is, climate change and Spring Valley, East County is getting hotter. And many people in Spring Valley have air conditioning but don't use it because they can't afford it. And so the optics of you providing, and don't get me wrong, I feel compassion for people experiencing this, but you're providing people with air conditioning. And so is there a better solution, perhaps moving a shelter like this into a milder climate instead of creating more issues and other resources that Spring Valley and some neighborhoods may not really have the capacity to energize some of these homes and really give them the proper shelter?
Yeah, so I know that you are not personally asking the county to like apologize for offering units that have AC attachment if we go down that path. But I want to be clear that like we can't, whether it's Spring Valley or somewhere in the central city, we can't put up a solution that's going to harm people, right? And I think that's just the difference in a smaller structure where somebody would be sleeping overnight, regardless of where it is. It gets my community gets high 90s, right? And I live further west from here, so I guess I would say like all of the communities of San Diego County need to like engage, and frankly, the board said all of this applies to all of the communities. But B, as it relates to the communities we're talking about, we have to do the things that will be responsible and humane for the people who are going to be using them, and that means in a place like this, when you're talking about relatively small structures, it means making sure that they're cool enough that people don't suffer heat stroke.
So I guess what I'd like to see is we're providing people experiencing homelessness with a great resource. I'd like some of that funding to go into the neighborhoods. The covered bus stops. The homeless need a place, need bus and transportation, and currently many parts of Spring Valley have 0 bus stops. So now you're asking to see people to go from a homeless shelter with a small air conditioning unit, leaving Spring Valley, 100-degree weather, many months of the year, now walking to a bus stop that is uncovered and in a neighborhood that has very few trees. So I'm wondering if there is a climate change or sort of a climate understanding as to where are we housing? Is it a permanent situation where for example, the Hamashab site has lots of trees, lots of tree cover. Would a solution be to keep those trees as part of the cooler environment for the shelters? So to sort of eliminate some of the heavy resources that we may be needing.
Yeah, so the broad question about the relevance of climate change, climate adaptation and mitigation, and the importance of paying attention in the design process to the, the impacts of global warming, et cetera, locally, is a good one that I know the county on several axes is currently working on. I know we get our land use and environmental group, which is another part that I'm not in, is sort of leading the coordination of other board directions around how do we think about the impact of climate change in our design. And our connection in my office to that effort is around, well, what does that mean for like things like tree canopy, which you sort of alluded to as it relates to people who are experiencing homelessness, asphalt and like this picture that's on the screen right now is one big blacktop. And that's, to your point, can be a particularly damaging, or I should say, it can get real hot, right? To use casual terms. And so I think we need to continue to work with our land use and environment group partners. The board has come forward with several like very firm sustainability, like climate sustainability related pieces. And so I think it's part of what we're factoring in. How it manifests will be part of the architecture and engineering like design conversation, right? So I don't, that's out of, now I'm out of my depth in terms of what they can do. What we can say is, how do you make this a place that is not like sweltering, so that people can actually not just stick in their little thing with the AC, but go outside and that kind of thing. So that's, and their job as the design professionals is to tell us how to do it. And so I think that's part of, again, back to the industry day related, like RFP goes out, like the part of that is we'll say the construction part, design and construction. And how do you, as a community, know what's in the construction and design part? And then the other part is the operations part. And how do you, as a community, know what's going to be in the operations and all those things we talked about? So again, I think one of the things that's great about this group and the types of questions that you tend to ask is that it reveals two things. One, a layer of interest in the actual underlying substance that is valuable because it allows us as county staff to go a little bit deeper, right? To say, well, yeah, let's just talk about that particular issue. And the other thing is, I think is important, is it also creates a path for you as community members to be like, no, I want to know, like, I want to see it. Don't just tell me that you're going to do it, like show me the paper that has it on it. And so it's good to be able to give that to you. So I'm glad you asked that question. And that's the current answer.
Are there any online questions?
Not yet.
Okay, so I have a couple others unless anyone else has.
Real quick, right now it's cold. Those units have heat.
They can, is the short version. Like when I saw them, I was on a little short vacation in Portland and occupational hazard. I rode my bike by location. I was like, well, let me pull over and chat with folks. And those ones had a heat as well. So I know that that's a thing that can exist.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
To what you're bringing up.
Oh, go ahead.
Is there any, in your proposal, is there any money that the county is going to provide to the communities around these sites for cleanup and for sanitation and for additional police or sheriffs? Is there any funds allocated to that, or is it all going to directly to building these sites and maintenance?
Yeah, so John's question for those on the phone is there any money in the current budget for the potential impacts that might exist around a site but not on the given location? And I think to the extent that question is about making sure to address in the budget those exact types of things, I think the answer is that there is resources to make sure that the operator is not just looking at like what's happening on this little footprint, but is further broader. So like the cleaning responsibility might not just be on the actual site, as an example. Is there current money in there that's earmarked for like the broader community generally, not as part of this homeless solutions resource? What I would say to that though is that like the community has the ability to like make those kinds of requests during this process to say, hey, this is something that we would like to see evaluated. We would like to know if that's going to be included. As I mentioned, this is coming back to the board. So I think those things are like, again, a mutual kind of opportunity.
Perry, you mentioned the word operator a couple of times.
Yeah.
Is not the county the operator?
No, so when I'm using that term operator in the context of these locations, I mentioned earlier in this conversation that the county generally does not have its staff running emergency sleeping villages or shelters, et cetera, or safe parking, that those tend to be in a procurement, an open public procurement, where a non-government entity can bid on an opportunity. And then everybody has a chance to see what they're bidding on. And then whoever wins is bound by the terms of the contract for the amount of money, time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I mean by operator.
And are those entities been identified yet?
No, it's open to this. So the open procurement part means that by definition, it's open to like every entity. Where they'll be published on a public site. There's a separate procurement department that manages all that. Our job is to make sure we let as many people know as possible so that we get as many operators to potentially kind of bid.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna say, I think in North County, you see that with like the rescue mission or they're going to be operating some of these new facilities out in Oceanside, for example. I was gonna make a comment question, I guess, is I'm so encouraged by the SBCA, the work you guys do, the GMIA, all of this, even our group, ECHTF. We can solve homelessness, right? And the framework talks about that. We're working on this framework to end this. So I think for myself as a resident of East County and specifically La Mesa, are there going to be any, and this might be down the road, but are we looking at any like measurable like end dates for these emergency solutions for these properties? Like we aim to stop using this parking or this spot by X date, and then after that, consider these ideas for that space for the communities to use.
So Bonnie's question for those on the Zoom was, is the county identified end dates for any of these emergency solutions essentially with the eye towards the permanent housing and support according to a person's need being the true path for a solution to homelessness? And the direct answer is not yet. And part of that is because the source of the emergency need, or the source of the solution to the emergency need, and the source of the solution to the permanent need are like different but related, right? They're overlapping. And what I mean is like it requires, like a permanent home requires the existence of an apartment, a studio, something like that, and the services associated. And we need that supply. And so we've got housing authorities and the state's putting out money. And then we've got this emergency need that's happening here. And so until that permanent need grows, and the Regional Task Force on Homelessness that I mentioned earlier has hired a consultant to identify all of that sort of regional supply need. And I'm oversimplifying. So, but the answer to the question is why we haven't yet, because we can't identify the point at which we'll have the supply necessary so that everybody's just going right to a permanent solution. That would be fantastic, but I don't think we're there yet. And so part of what I think we do need to do with these emergency solutions, and your community, some in this room and others have raised, is like, well, we need to have like a constant like eval check-in kind of opportunity as a community to hear and know what's actually happening, separate fact from fiction in whatever direction that might be, right? We need to like be open to those kind of transparent conversations. But that's the answer to that question, is we just, yeah.
Hey, I was thinking of the RETA numbers and all this stuff and how much, this aligns with what's going on with the each of the community development,
Yeah.
departments and.
So Bonnie just brought up the regional housing needs assessment, which is just the state requires communities to determine how much of different sort of levels of housing by income level, a community needs. And so every couple of years, there's an assessment done. It's outside of my scope in this conversation. I just am a dork, so I happen to know a little bit about it. But what I would say is the hardest type of permanent housing to create and pay for is also the portion where the largest proportion of people who are experiencing homelessness come from. It's the 0 to 30% area median income, like household. And that's the reason for that is probably obvious. It's expensive for everybody to live here. It's especially expensive if you make little or no money, right? And so if you add in service needs, right, which isn't always, people do not always need service needs, but often people experiencing homelessness have like health conditions of various types. And so that low cost housing also needs the subsidized service support, right? And so getting the supply of that to the right level is a big job. And right now, what we're hearing from our teams and from many in the community is like, look, even for people who could get out, they just need to get there now for a week, for a few weeks, et cetera. And then we'll get them into the rest of the supply.
I have a.
We have a question
Yeah.
online.
We have a question, Caesar. On Zoom.
Cesar, you're muted if you can, there you go.
Yes, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Caesar.
Hi, Omar, I wanted to just comment regarding your comments earlier regarding the push for these proposals. There was an article recently in the Times of San Diego that suggests that the hotel voucher program is ending March 31st. Now, with that said, I understand the push and the focus here in Spring Valley. I spoke with you recently. I mentioned, I introduced myself as being one of the residents on Safford. It's a street that will run parallel to Sweetwater. And this proposed congregate shelter will be almost literally in my backyard. I've never been a not in my backyard type of person, but considering that this again will be almost literally in my backyard, the proposed location there suggests that it's going to be housing approximately 30 to 40 beds. This is a congregate shelter. At least that's according to the handout that you left here recently.
Cesar, let me jump in real quick on two things, and then I'll take whatever question, but just a couple of points to clarify. That handout had two options,
Yes.
a non-congregate and a congregate. I think we've heard a number of things from community where the congregate is not an option that folks in the community are generally in favor of in that location. And so I think that's not going to be, the congregate is not going to be one that is going forward on the recommendation set. So just to clarify that. And then the other thing I want to clarify for everybody is the article that Cesar referenced was not, that's a different hotel program than the one I was referring to. That's the regional homeless assistance program run by our housing and community development services. I just want to make sure to keep those things straight, but go ahead, Cesar.
Okay. Well, then, thank you. And that is some relief that at least that congregate shelter, evidently, according to your comments here now on the record, that is no longer being a considered proposal. Again, it is still little relief because we still don't know, again, who the contractors are going to be for this facility, how many tiny homes or shelters or cabins or whatever the case is going to be, how many are being proposed for that area. I posed a question previously as to whether these are going to be single men, families, as to whether there is going to be in and out privileges. I question the county's prudence, considering that there is a revitalization of the neighborhood here, with other establishments, businesses coming in, bringing in jobs, bringing in tax dollars to the neighborhood, where again, the focus should be on rehabilitating the community as opposed to bringing in something that may be causing additional blight.
Yeah, and Caesar, I want to just make sure that you and everybody in this room and everybody else on the Zoom sort of understand I just will keep underlining the like potential, the potential site part of this conversation. I want to resist describing things like a done deal, so to speak. Like, we are in the process of having an earnest conversation with you and your neighbors, and I have spent a lot of time, and I know, as you do, what is currently, at least frequently over the last couple of years, at the end of your street where the mall is, or where the back of the shopping mall is, which is just to say, it's not look, we didn't come out to have these meetings to just say just to say that we engage the community. Like, we added a site that the community brought forward as a suggestion. We've taken off a couple of options that the community has said, hey, like, we don't think this is going to work for us. So we're really trying hard to have that two-way dialogue. And I would actually ask you and others, it's one of the things that was on our list. Are there sites among the ones that we've talked about? Julia mentioned one. Unfortunately, it's actually a very good example, because it's the one that I think Caesar probably doesn't favor. But just to ask, and I'll start with you, Caesar, I guess, if you don't mind, are there any of those sites that you think, yeah, like, I would support this?
Well, I haven't studied those other locations very deeply. I mean, obviously, the one that really concerns me is the one that, again, is going to be almost literally in my backyard. The suggestion would be that perhaps, because there are no immediately adjacent homes to the area, is going to be the facility, the proposed location there across the T, which again is on the westbound of the off ramp, just to the north of what is this, Hamishaw Road.
Yeah, 8570. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Caesar. I want to. It looks like there's some comments back in the room. I want to see if there were folks in here as well. And by all means, keep reaching out. I think I sent an email, so don't hesitate to keep reaching out to me. Any other folks who are in the room, even if it's not your immediate neighborhood, have sites that you identify that you think we'd be open to more on this one?
I like that.
I like the one Caesar just said, more so out of all of the sites. But I'm just saying, out of the ones you proposed,
Yeah.
I'm not saying go with that one or anything. Like, I'm just saying out of the options.
Okay, so that's like maybe 3 folks that have made a reference to 8570 Hamishaw Road in this conversation. And the reality, Judson, to your point, is like, we don't get we don't have like an endless supply of options to work with. And so it's a really delicate dance and process of like, how do we engage and make sure and try to let people know what's coming or what may be coming, and how to design it in a way that works for folks. So I hear you, and that's good feedback. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have a quota as to how many, like, actually what's needed? Do you need, sleeping cabins for 30 and safe parking for 20? Is that something that you guys have in mind already?
Yeah, so Michelle, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle's question is, do we have a quota for the amount of whatever intervention we actually need? The answer today is no. And that's in part because we need the better data. We know that it's more than 20, right? Even the sort of the sort of lowest threshold of information that we have about unsheltered homelessness in the unincorporated area, including Spring Valley, is greater than that. But we don't know, like with mathematical precision. The best sources are improving dramatically, and frankly, this board action, not the emergency housing part, but the enhanced outreach part that the supervisor called for, enhanced outreach and data, is very much about getting to your very question, which is like, how do we know not just once a year, right? When a bunch of volunteers, it's coming up, I'm gonna do it, the point in time count, like I'm actually gonna do it in Spring Valley. Just as it turns out, our office is like East County sort of hub. So I'm gonna be out here that morning. But like that's done by volunteers. It's important. It's a mixture of volunteers and outreach folks. But it's also one day, right? And so this board action will create more people engaging and entering people into HMIS every time they contact them, right? And that way we get to a point, Michelle, to your question of like, well, how do we know what the need actually is? That's part of it, is a better understanding on a daily basis of who's experiencing homelessness and where they are, right? And then also the need question varies. If we do a better job, can you put the framework slide back up real quick? If we do a better job on
Are we talking this
the
one?
framework for ending homelessness, it's like the third slide in here. So yeah, this one here, this framework slide. If we do a better job at this root cause and upstream prevention, and we focus more on diversion and mitigation, that the answer to the question, how much do we need, will change. It should change if we do that work right and we do it well. If part of the reason I talked about that systems team earlier is that there's a part of this conversation, right, that is about poverty and near poverty. I mean, if you look at what it costs, even at 200% of the federal poverty level, we know that for a low-income senior, for example, who's on Social Security or disability or something, like those trend lines are never going to cross, right? And so then the question becomes, well, what do we do now for people who are maybe able to work and able to we need to increase supportive employment, which we know we have peer-reviewed data that shows that supportive employment does help empower people and help them get and remain housed. But if we do that better, we will need less of that emergency supply. And that's part of the overall system change. So today I can't tell you, but that's what we're trying to march towards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my turn. One of the things that I'm concerned about, well, not really a concern, but what I would want ask for you guys to include in your research of this proposed land is maybe coming up with the coordination of all the other nonprofits in the area that are assisting homeless people, so that when there is a location selected, the other nonprofits know to go there to assist. Because right now we have like people who just dump food at the parks. And so we've cleaned up that park, but now there's people who just take food there. And then the homeless people who had gone are now coming back to get that food there.
Yeah, and Julia, this is one of those things that for those on the phone or in the Zoom, the question is like, is there a way to coordinate with the nonprofit and rest of the sort of homeless services ecosystem so that people don't provide food, for example, at a park that it creates an issue? I'm going to tease that out because there's sort of two answers. The first is there a way to coordinate? Absolutely 100%. And we should, and we will, and we do. I mean, right now, I know that when I get calls, and I've offered to everybody in this room, like if you see somebody, they need help, let us know. We gave you the mobile crisis response team number that you can share far and wide for when there's a crisis type scenario. And then we are continuing to build a coordinated outreach support that is connected to the nonprofit world, et cetera. The nuance, though, is like, how do you tell somebody called by faith, for example, not to try to help, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's, or it doesn't have to be called by faith. They can just be called by their just desire to try to do what they feel like they can. Like, it just, the thing that has been like a pleasant experience of this whole thing for me and for many of our staff is how many just like compassionate people, some frustrated, some exhausted, but genuinely compassionate human beings we have encountered in Spring Valley and Lakeside, et cetera, that are saying like, hey, we get it. We just want to make sure that it's done right and thoughtful and doesn't like, lead to, trash or what have you, that people are actually getting help. So I guess I say that to say the flip side of that compassion sometimes is that people will want to go and provide that stuff in a moment. And so and can you blame them, right? Like somebody's like, man, I see this person over here hungry. How do you have a parent or grandparent who's trying to teach their kid these things? And it's like, you want a space for that type of compassion, right?
Yeah.
I think that the coordination piece can help us like better let people who are experiencing homelessness know where there are like formal or informal, more fixed operations that have trash cans and sanitation and hygiene and that sort of thing, right? There was a gentleman who we couldn't meet today because it's a Sunday and he's a pastor, but who reached out from the community and was basically like, we do stuff at my church, and we have all the types of things that you're talking about, like service and cleanliness and all this kind of stuff. How do we, like, as part of that coordination, let people know when our outreach teams are out there, like we want to help you get into a permanent house, right?
Yeah.
We want to help you get the services you need. But if today is not that day, we also want you to know that like here are these other things, right? And I think that's the truth of the path of the process. Yes.
I want to thank Captain Evans for coming out. I know I've seen you at the last 4 or more meetings, and I appreciate you attending those. As soon as you started arriving, the questions towards you started. But I know there are concerns about the homeless that are on the streets and how to enforce the illegal activity. I don't know if you can address that and what the sheriffs can do to help the community address those illegal issues happening on the streets in front of them.
Sure. Well, I mean, our priority is just the same with Omar's here, is to keep these people housed as quickly as possible. However, yes, we understand that they are out there committing crimes or disturbances or just a general nuisance. There's some things that we can and can't do based on law, the Constitution, and the bookable offenses versus citable offenses. So some of the issues that I know are constantly brought up are the fact that somebody's just sleeping on the sidewalk. We cannot, I mean, Boise, he's talked about Boise before, go up and remove that person. And even at some point when we do get given that opportunity to leave, or if they're on private property, it's nothing more than a citation for us. And they would have to continuously and purposefully violate that penal code or municipal code for us to eventually put them in jail. And at that point, it's for a very, very short time, hours, some maybe a day if we're lucky. So in terms of that portion of it, I mean, it's difficult for us and we get frustrated as well. As far as seeing illegal activity going on, I did get some stats, so they're working on some stats in those particular areas, especially Orville, to see what the call volume is like and what types of calls are. So we're working on that as well, but I would continue to tell people to call. And I know some people get frustrated because maybe a deputy doesn't show up for a long time. I know somebody made a mention that they never show up, and if that's truly the case, I would like to know, because they should be showing up. And we are short staffed. That's not an excuse. It's just a fact of where we are right now. So sometimes that delay will be there. Other than that, yeah, we just continue to call as community members. We've been working, our homeless response team goes out there frequently. I know for a fact I've been out there with them. I drove the site twice this week, so I am engaged as well. That's kind of, did I get everything for you?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a follow-up question on that, Captain Evans. As far as the drug usage, and if someone has, let's say they have possession of a small amount of methamphetamines or needles or something of that illegal substance, is there a program where we are not so much incarcerating them or putting them into like a 45-minute hold somewhere to rehabilitate them in that fashion as a means to stopping that behavior?
So there was a good program, and it's not as influential anymore, called drug court, where they would get a certain amount of arrest, and then they'd be put into a pathway to where their charges or their potential, I guess you could say, jail time would be forgiven if they went through a rehab. That's difficult to get those people in there now, mostly because simple possession is nothing more than a ticket.
Okay.
Back Prop 5747, a lot of those things were put down to a much lower level. Where it used to be a felony and you would go to jail, now you get a ticket. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm all about rehabilitation.
Sure, absolutely,
Not
sure, we-
putting them in there. But
Oh, because that if somebody gets rehabilitated, they're no longer a problem, right? It's as they're using and as they're continuing that behavior, they're a problem for us. So we would prefer that they don't use.
I have a law enforcement question.
Sure.
I was having a debate with a friend about panhandling. And I said, no, you shouldn't give people money because it encourages them to live in that area. Their comment was, if you don't give them money, then they're more likely to like rob and steal to get the money. Is that something that you guys see? Like,
So we do track transit related crimes.
Uh-huh.
It's called TR, it's always been called transit. We should probably change the name. However, if we do track it and what they do and how much they do it. And more often than not, is those simple inebriated, maybe under the influence, maybe 5150. We don't see the trend where you have roaming bands of homeless people robbing and stealing and breaking into your cars. Really not that way. I thought it was that way initially too. We started looking at the stats and it's not. We just did a warrant the other day where we probably closed 30 cases and it was somebody who was in a home. So it's, I would say vast majority of those crimes are not committed by homeless. However, they do, they'll go out and steal and we caught them. And many times it's just going to a store and taking chips or alcohol and running out the front door. So we do have stats on that. Thank you.
oh, thank you.
As a follow-up to her panhandling.
Can you just
question.
try to speak up a little bit so those
Yeah,
online
as a-
can hear?
As a follow-up to the panhandling question, what is the sheriff's department official response to people standing in roadways, public right of ways, and for that matter, private property, panhandling people? Is there a policy for that?
There was another, and my apologies, I can't remember the case, but it was a Supreme Court case or Ninth District Court of Appeals case that says we can't do anything in regards to panhandling. It's your First Amendment right to go out there and ask for money all day long or whatever. Now, there are things we can do, and I know CSP is big on off ramps and on ramps in terms of being in a way or a road hazard. Yes, if you're in the middle, a center divide or median, we can ask them to leave, and we have in the past. Typically, any traffic control issues are CHP, however, we do deal on those as well. So what's our policy or philosophy on it is if we get enough calls, we'll go out there and ask for the person. Not side.
I have a comment from East County Task Force. You guys have a sign, I believe, that encourages people to not support the panhandling, right? I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, that started at the very beginning of the task force, and some of the information that's printed on there is inaccurate. The text number doesn't work, for example. But yeah, it was not encourage panhandling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too far away from
Yeah.
the homeless solutions conversation we had with Omar. I know we're getting close to our 1:30 time, expecting it to go over a little bit. I do have maybe a comment or a question, I guess. we've heard a lot about the shelters and the homeless services, resources. You mentioned in the solutions, if you can go back to the solutions, having programs and income support and short-term rent and housing assistance. Who are these programs for?
What do you mean?
Is it for people who are experiencing homelessness or people who are low income?
Yes, I mean, I'm being glib. The answer,
No, please, no.
the answer is both in many cases, right? So I mentioned earlier, the continuum of care. There's this federal organization called the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it is one of the federal agencies charged most directly with funding housing related to people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And so it has a technical definition of homelessness and a technical definition for at risk of homelessness. That technical definition for at risk of homelessness starts with 30% or below area median income, and then has like factor after factor after factor that includes like at risk of immediately losing their home due to eviction or domestic violence or any number of other things. And then there's a laundry list of other sub factors. So that's way down in the weeds on who it's for, right? So some of these things are for people who are not yet experiencing homelessness. And in fact, some of the things we're talking about are even for people who aren't even in that technical definition of at risk. It's like people who are just, I shouldn't say just struggling, but are struggling and don't want to be headed down that path.
Yeah, I guess what I think of like the locations where the homeless, the conversation that we're talking about as far as Spring Valley, it's a working class neighborhood, you know, and many people who are living multi-generational homes would like to see a relief on how can they also get some of this help and some of the resources, and how can the community itself say, hey, we're going to help and create a fantastic solution for homeless, a resource place. But what about the rest of the neighborhood? You know, what about the blight that's happening and now being exacerbated by so many people potentially, we don't know the stats of people who are wandering the neighborhood, or even the situations where we have park and ride, where we have 10 or 15 or 50 cars. What happens at that point when they say, okay, the facility is closed, you have to now leave? I'm assuming because it's not a day use, right? It's overnight. So there's this sort of issue that I keep in my mind, seeing a broad community kind of suffering from all of these resources being concentrated just in the homeless resource areas.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I will say, I think on the lead in, I mentioned that there are none of these unsheltered resources currently in the unincorporated county. So it's not concentrated at all now. I mean, and a lot of the other challenges around struggling and blight that you mentioned, those currently exist. So I don't. There's a challenge not to pit one group of need against another group of need. The Board of Supervisors has said, like, on this issue, it wants to see action from a policy perspective. And so that's our job to go and execute. I would say, like, the Community Services Block Grant is a specific funding source that goes to a group in our Office of Equitable Communities for the purpose of addressing poverty-related issues in the community. Which is just to say, there are lots of other, I shouldn't say lots, I don't want to overstate it. There are other sources of funding resources. Our Housing and Community Development Services have the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which did not just go to people experiencing homelessness. As a matter of fact, I think primarily it went to people who were in a home to help them stay in those homes, like the Emergency Rental Assistance piece. So I think that the answer is, this continued dialogue can also expand to who do we engage with in the Office of Equitable Communities? Who do we engage with in like the other parts of the county that are also county government that are also focused on the types of things that you're talking about? There was I'll pause after this. There was a board item and if you email me, I can get you the information, on a call to evaluate the establishment of a county office of economic prosperity and community development. And I think that might be the type of thing that, given what economic prosperity and community development tended to focus on, that might be something that is geared towards the types of things that you're talking about.
We have a question online. Michelle, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, the audio keeps cutting out on Zoom online, just so I had some challenges listening in and out. But my question, I understand we have somebody representing law enforcement on here, and I've spoken out regularly and consistently about our ongoing safety concerns that we as the neighbors have been experiencing for over 2.5 years, specifically on the Oroville Street side. I heard that you spoke on you were collecting data to see what those calls were like and what we were experiencing. This is something that we're dealing with regularly. And I mean, I hate to say this because I'm a big advocate of supporting law enforcement, but as somebody who lives there, who is a homeowner, a taxpayer, and a business owner, I am seriously disappointed in the fact that we do not get the police support that we desperately need. Our physical health, our mental health has been extremely challenged in the area. And I specifically want to know what we can do more. We have the Spring Valley Community Alliance where we're doing regular cleanups. We've personally invested our own funds for security cameras, which just tell what crimes are going on after the fact. Is there anything more that we as citizens of this area can do legally to continue to fight for our health and safety? Thank you.
Sure, yeah, that's a lot. You know what I'd be happy to do as well, maybe this is not the perfect place to do all this, but maybe we can have different meetings. I think we're more going into the housing, so I'd be more than happy to meet with the SVCA. When's your next meeting? I'm more than happy to come.
We can create one.
We can create one for you.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, please do it, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle,
Yeah, no,
Michelle, thank you for that. You know,
I'd love to meet with you guys, please. And I'll give you the stats and I'll come up with any information and we can come up with a plan in terms of getting more services down there. I will say, like I mentioned earlier, we are very short at our station, but we're getting back up to staffing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I know that we're at 1:30 and I guess I would just, you know, a big part of this process for us, and I mentioned we've had several of these meetings, in person, virtual, et cetera, to give feedback. At a couple of the sites, we've actually been on site with members of the community. The Orville Street location, actually there with neighbors who live along the other side of that exact location. Also at the 8570 Hamishaw roadside. I can tell you that the homes on both of those adjacent places all received the same flyer that you all got. I can personally vouch for that having happened. And we continue. It's very, very hard. There's a baseline level of community engagement around the sort of formal structures that exist in the government, right? In our case, the community planning groups, the community service planning groups. And then there's also like the engagement that we benefit from the community, whether that's nonprofits like the East County Homeless Task Force, whether it's the Sheriff's Department's groups, or groups like the Spring Valley Community Alliance and others. And so the Spring Valley Community Alliance has a direct line that is not like only they can have it. Right? I mean, you, I guess, since there's several of you that are here, we want people to engage. It makes what we do better and helps us work together. Doesn't mean that we're always going to agree. And sometimes we have to, you know, get there. And so there might be a little bit of challenge. I know it's 1:30 and we've got to go, but I want to let folks know the Orville Street neighbors, you know, Michelle and her neighbors have been very consistently engaged on the issues that they face, and we're responsive and working together on those. we're gonna move forward towards trying to figure out a set of initial identified spaces. We're gonna package up all of the community input that we've received. Today I heard probably the site that seemed to receive the most positive feedback from an emergency sleeping cabin situation was the 8570 Hamashaw Road. That's my read. I don't want to put words in folks' mouths, but I think we've got some notes there. And so we're gonna like try to move towards now the process of molding an implementation and funding plan, evaluate all the feedback that we got in, and happy to come back in early January and have another conversation and say, okay, well, where actually are we? And do that process. And I'll just say again to John, you know, to the extent that you and your neighbors and colleagues are interested in further engagement, like, let's do it.
Our president is in the process of engaging your contact person regarding that. A quick question on the budget. These sites don't have sewer, water, power. Is the budget for the money you're talking about going to go into doing these leasehold or the land improvements?
Yeah.
Even though that some of it's Caltrans property, some of it's county property, I assume it's all either one of those two.
Yeah, so the question about how to handle improvements is utility improvements and things like that, so water, power, sewer. All of those have to be built into the program design. Whether Caltrans is part of the payment source or not, at this point, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we have to account for paying for it in some way. Okay. Yeah. And Raleigh, I guess I would just say, thank you and the Spring Valley Community Alliance for always being willing to engage in what I view as an earnest, really engaged dialogue to try to improve your community, and we'll just keep at it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming, Omar. And anyone that's online right now, thank you very much. And keep on our website, go on our Facebook, stay engaged. The community needs you. We still meet up every Sunday for our community cleanups. And there's a lot to do. So stay tuned and have a great Christmas, happy holidays, and Happy New Year. Are we done online? Stop share.